This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to the Digital Dish,
a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. I'm Lois.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Jeannie. And we want to make sure smart women and their points of view were being heard. Welcome back, everybody. Missy's dancing already. Welcome back. It's February.
I'm so excited about this episode.
I know. This is for Black History Month, and Missy did the interview. And tell me what's on your mind about this.
Well, for you and for everyone else, I'm curious, Jeannie, have you ever heard of the Crown Act?
No. I mean, maybe I've heard it, but I don't know enough.
Okay. I don't want to give it away just yet. I want to see if our listeners can pick up on maybe what that is. Don't Google it just yet. Listen to our conversation with Tiera. She is fantastic.
She is.
And like the epitome of a woman in digital and a minority woman in digital at that. Just a poised professional, full of what we're calling grit and grace. So.
Okay. Well, wow. You really set us up. So we have to listen.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me know what you think. I am really excited this February to have a special, amazing guest that I've actually had the pleasure of working with or working for, as a client. Her name is Tiera Gray. And without any further ado, we're going to jump right into just the conversation about what it's like in our experiences as minorities in leadership in technology this Black History Month. So, Tiera, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello. Tiera Gray. Fun fact, my name is spelled Tiera, but pronounced Tiera. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today, Missy. Introducing myself, where do I start? So I am currently Vice President of our Office of the CIO at Exelon. And in my role and capacity, I'm responsible for the IT's strategic objectives, how we manage our financials, our processes, our vendors, our talent, organizational change management. So a pretty hefty scope of responsibilities, but certainly something I very much enjoy doing.
Awesome. And so can I ask, why technology? Why IT? Like, what was your first entryway into it and what's keeping you in tech?
Yeah, that's funny. I was just, I was a guest speaker on a panel last week and someone said, "Oh, you're IT. I can have you fix my laptop." And I said, "Oh, hold up. Wait a minute. I'm not that kind of IT." Right. So I knew at an early age, I had a deep desire to ensure that I selected a career that would help me to kind of have a better life than I had growing up, a career that would help me take care of my family. And I remember in high school, one year, a tech company came to our school and I thought, wow, that sounds very interesting. That's something I could do. And so I actually started my career, started school in a degree with information technology. And after my first coding class, I dropped it. And I thought to myself, I cannot do this. I am not a coder. I'm not a developer. But I still had an interest in the field and in the industry. And so I continued to pursue that by taking several classes and roles in my day life, if you will, in companies in their tech department. And that's when I learned that there's so many different facets to technology. It's not just coding and developing, which, by the way, is what a lot of the younger generation believes it is today. Mm-hmm. It's so much more. Technology is like any other business. You have talent, you have communications aspect, you have financials, right? You have governance and policies and procedures. So those are the areas that I then started to branch out into. So while not directly a technical person, my career has been within the information technology industry in very facets of bringing structure, connecting teams together and driving processes and standards and such.
So I hear a lot about women who maybe are, especially in this generation, getting more ingrained in STEM, science and technology and engineering and math. But for our age or women who are more seasoned in their careers, what are some of the challenges that you see, or what advice could you give to other people? Culturally, IT is different around just kind of how to grow their career and how to get involved or stay involved if they didn't join from a very early age, something around STEM.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is the world we live in is so technology enabled. There is not an aspect of one's life that does not interface with technology, right? Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, it is endless possibilities in terms of opportunity and from a career perspective. So I'd encourage any person, young lady, to join a field in technology and consider the different facets of technology, not just that, you could be potentially a developer, right?
Just culturally, technology is a bit different. There are other male-dominated industries, and the role that women play in tech is somewhat different to navigate, being the minority. Like, you're typically the only woman in a room, but then when you are a minority of that minority, there's another level of a cultural aspect if you are the only ethnic minority in the rooms.
Well, that's interesting you say that, Missy, because, for me as a woman, as a Black woman, I can't separate my life from corporate from my day-to-day, right? So I deal with those same types of challenges in my day-to-day. And so how I navigate corporate America and how I navigate life is very similar in that I'm oftentimes in a corporate setting, similar to my day-to-day, the only woman in the room and the only Black woman in the room. Mm-hmm. That can be a pro and the con. The pro is people want to hear what I have to say and hear what I have to contribute to the conversation. So that creates an opportunity. Right. And we as women have to take on those opportunities as we get them. Mm-hmm. The con to that is, being the only woman or woman of color in the room is oftentimes or sometimes my opinion is disregarded or I'm undervalued in terms of what I bring to the table. That, again, is no different than what I experience in America each day. Right. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's what gives me the grit that I have to keep going and just kind of be resilient and persevere. For every challenge that I encounter in corporate or in the real world, that's just the lessons learned that I get in terms of how to best navigate that situation, moving forward. So I know that's not what you asked me, but I just get to give some perspective on you really can't separate the two. Is what I think is most important for us as women to understand. We are resilient as women. I read somewhere that you don't want to say strong woman because that implies that you always have to be that way, but we are strong women. And so there's nothing that I don't think that we can tackle if we put our hearts and minds to it. There's also a lot to be said for diverse perspectives. And so while technology can be a male-dominating industry, there is a huge appetite for diverse perspectives, particularly women, right? And also women of color. Mm-hmm. And so there again presents another opportunity for us to take that on head on and bring and show what we can, bring to the table.
That's so fantastic. Like, what I'm hearing is like this balance of like grit with grace. Yeah. And it's kind of all wrapped by authenticity. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just how we navigate life. And so if you can authentically be in a role, a corporate culture, a company, on a team where you can be your authentic self, then it's kind of a moot point. Yeah. And I know it's important to you and even, to your company right now to have diversity in your teams, just working on, this fun gay engagement that we love so much. There's multi-generations diversity. There's definitely women, and you've empowered and coached and trained and developed women leaders and all kinds of minorities. So just kudos to you. And that was one of the reasons why, as I was thinking, like, who could we chat with to really honor and feature? And that's why your name kind of came to the top, because that's that diversity of thought that happens as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
To go back a little bit, We had MLK last month. It's Black History Month now. We think about the role of like minorities and minority women in tech. I wrote an article called Digital Demands Diversity. It's on our ISG page for all of you listeners. And we talk about women in leadership and diversity in leadership, because culture really changes from the top down. And so, if you had to kind of predict and say, okay, in Martin Luther King's wildest dreams, would he ever have, thought to see, a Tiera where she is, and, many other successful professional African-American women in leadership and in this thing called technology that really didn't exist back in those days as it does today. As we think about, metaverse and AI and cybersecurity, just all the things, like, do you have any, predictions on like the role of Black women in technology, and or vice versa, how technology can affect Black women?
Well, that's a loaded question. And the first thing that comes to mind is absolutely Martin Luther King would have imagined this, right? He was a visionary. He was a leader who saw things that others did not see and knew the possibilities that others couldn't even comprehend, right? So yes, he would have imagined us being where we are today. I think that, again, there's so many endless possibilities of women and Black women in technology. One of the biggest things, though, is there's evolving customer demands, and those evolving customer demands are rooted in accessibility. They're rooted in authenticity. They're rooted in understanding how products and services and technology can benefit them, but also understanding how people who look like them are leveraging those products and services, right? So when I just think about the role that we as Black women can play in technology, again, there's just so many facets. Our customer base is people who look like us. So there's one opportunity. The way in which technology is trending, it is helping to accelerate so many facets of our life. And I think that you'll see more and more digitized cities, more and more AI and advanced technologies that are, to some extent, helping people not to think for themselves. So when you ask the question of what could Black women or women in technology bring, and what I see on the horizon, it's all those things, right? We're kind of at the forefront of a lot of things that happen around us, whether it be rooted in our family, in our careers, and in how we're leading and driving a variety of things. We are also very visionary. And so we're seeing some of these things, but it all is an underpinning of humanity and how we navigate day to day. So that's the only way I can think to respond to your question there, Missy.
Perfect. I mean, I'm inspired by you. I'm engaged. I'm excited about the future and looking to help bring up this next generation of women in technology and women in digital. So any last words of wisdom or nuggets that you'd want to share?
The one thing I'd share is that for me, I've had a dynamic and rewarding career. I wouldn't change any part of it. I think that for me, it's been rooted in building quality relationships, investing in myself, understanding my worth, and being intentional about owning my own career. So irrespective of technology, that's just what I would tell any woman, any minority woman who's working on herself and her career. And you can't separate that career from being a daughter, a sister, a mother, a professional, right? A Black woman, a woman. And so, taking all of those life experiences with you as you embark on your journey and as you define what your journey is, I'd say always be inquisitive. Try to put yourself in your leader's shoes and don't just look at completing a task at hand, but seeking to understand how what you're asked to do connects to the bigger picture and to the overarching company strategy. Own your career, be very intentional about your career goals and objectives, and find your purpose, find your voice. I'm speaking with you today, Missy, and this is a part of me continuing to find my own voice, right? And hopefully that will help other women. The other thing I'd say is be open to taking on new challenges and risks. I've walked through so many doors taking a leap of faith in areas that I had no direct knowledge of, right? I developed this playbook that I anchor on, which is a set of transferable skills that no matter in any environment, I'm always anchoring on my playbook, right? And my playbook says, okay, Tiera, understand the landscape, understand the stakeholders, and try to immediately start to connecting some dots so that you can bring structure and make sense out of chaos, right? And that's what's always served me well. I'd say build solid relationships and be intentional about who you're interacting with. Be authentic in those interactions. And what's important there is I've encountered mentors, sponsors, and a variety of people who have helped me throughout my career. But I've also encountered people who probably weren't given the best advice, and it may not have been rooted in the right place, right? And so make sure you surround yourself with people who are invested and care about your growth and development. I once had a mentor that told me, hey, don't wear that type of hairstyle to work. And I thought to myself, well, why? And it goes against what we promote today in terms of bringing your whole self to work. And so it literally took me 15, 20 years to wear that hairstyle to work again.
I've been there so many times.
Yeah. I started to kind of downplay my own culture in the office place. My hair, my clothes, the way I talked, everything I tried to alter. And then when I did that, it was like, oh, where you're too pretty, you're too perfect, you're too polished. So you really have to understand who the source is of some of the advice that you're getting and remain authentic to yourself, because 15, 20 years ago when I was giving that advice, that is no longer the advice today that I would share with anybody or that I would anchor on. Come as your whole self and be authentic and true to who you are. The last thing I'll share is as women, we have to be focused on self-care. Too many times we are all things for everyone and we are not enough to ourselves. And so in technology, I'm telling you, I have my mom and aunts and uncles, they'll say, what the heck do you do that you work so hard? And I'm like, well, in technology world, we got huge system deployments, we got cutover weekends, we got cutover at night, and they don't understand that.
Right.
And by them not understanding that, they still require a lot of you in your home life. And so you got to find a balance of ensuring the self-care, self-love, and stop trying to be all things to everyone. I just told a relative yesterday, hey, I need a mental break, not having that conversation today. Right?
Boundaries.
That's right, boundaries. You got it.
Tiera, I have ran out of paper of all of the notes of the advice and the tips, and I'm applying this to myself. I know I talked about the next generation, but I think this is going to be so applicable to all of our listeners and then even to our male listeners in the audience to want to better understand how to better advocate and be better, allies and champions and sponsors that we need.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know we're pushing up on time, but we could probably sit here and catch up for hours. So
we could, because I have no shortage of opinions or thoughts or life experiences. So.
That is right. All right. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Hey, Lois. Hey, Jeannie.
Hey.
So before we get into what you think, I'm wondering if any of our listeners or if either of you picked up on what the Crown Act is about or could potentially be about.
I didn't.
No?
I confess.
Okay. No, this is great because I love to share things that I've learned. And I knew what it was, but I didn't actually know that CROWN was an acronym. And the acronym CROWN, CROWN, I'm reading off the website so I don't mess anything up. It's about creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. And I knew this happened in maybe 2020, but it actually happened in 2019, where 20 states out of the 50 states actually have made it illegal to discriminate on the basis of hair. So, when I was starting out in my career, it was, you can't really have braids. It was frowned upon. Definitely, it would even be in policy, no dreadlocks and things like that. And it's just incredible that now there is an act to just make it very universal and acceptable. And it's only in 20 states, but out of the 20 that are remaining, 15 of them already have legislation in the pipeline. So I just thought that was incredible, because Tiera talked about that, not getting advice. And that was good advice to advance in your career as a leader back then, but that's not the advice today. And it's about your authentic self, and you can't change who you are in and out of the office. So I just thought that was really cool, and people can read up about it.
I have heard of that now that you mention it, but I didn't know what it was called. But I'm delighted that was, I thought she just really did have a really strong point of view on can't separate the person from the work. And I loved that. I thought that was so strong. So
No, absolutely. Well, and I was actually just looking up something it reminded me of when I was doing a little research for another podcast. There was something that Mary Barra did, who's the CEO of GM. When she first started at GM, one of the first things she did is she got rid of the dress code.
Oh.
And that reminded me of the first thing that Mary did was she removed the dress code and simply made a statement, something like dress as you believe is appropriate, something like that, to the point of everybody has their own who they are, and you want them to bring that to the workplace. And just what an empowering way for, anyone to come to the workplace that, can bring their own diversity. So that was really cool. But one thing that I wanted to also touch on, which I think is so important, and when we first started this podcast, I thought was an important thing is, when you think of women in tech, when you think tech, everybody thinks coders. And she said, she took that coding class and she decided she didn't want to do it. And, there's so many aspects to tech, especially like even in UI, UX design, which is user experience design, thinking about how technology is entering all of our lives. And, and she mentioned smart cities and, different ways that technology is enabling our daily life. And you got to have the different perspectives. It can't all be designed by men, right? It can't all be designed by people who live in cities. It needs to be designed by a very diverse set of individuals to really get that tech working for all of us and in all of our unique ways of operating. So I think the importance of being in tech as a woman of color or any background, and bringing that background to your work environment and really enriching what we do and how we can bring tech to those around us, I think is so important.
And to your point, Lois, I mean, the thing is that she talked about is being exposed and educated what the options are in IT. And I think that's a really good point that you bring up. She said, okay, I'm not a coder. That doesn't mean, and a lot of times people are looking at STEM only, but there's so many skills that are needed in tech. So I love the fact that she said, I'm not a coder, because I said, oh yeah, I was back in the day when they had the punch cards, and it was awful. So yeah, no, she's absolutely right. You may not be a coder, but that does not mean you can't get into tech. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Or you might not be a help desk person, like hardware.
Right.
Someone's like, oh, you're in technology. Can you help me figure out how to use this app? And I'm like, no.
You could be a project manager.
My mother really still doesn't understand what I do, so she sends me to all the other 94-year-old people to fix she goes, can you go look at their computer? Mom, that's not what I do.
You're in technology. Fix it.
I'm technology. She goes, and that's about all she understands. Do you know how to fix a computer? No, I don't, but okay. I go and I rearrange things on there. Yeah. Anyway, that's not important. But she was such a breath of fresh air. I was so glad that Tiera was on, because she really just had a lot of interesting things to say about authenticity and education and exposure. I was really, I loved her whole approach on this one.
Self-care.
Yes, self-care.
Not doing too much and burning out when you're working, for a deployment on the weekends and at night, and you still do your 9 to 5.
Yeah, so many good lessons for all of us to learn. So thanks for sharing that interview, Missy. It was fantastic. Really appreciated it.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you like our podcast, please subscribe and rate and review us. Thank you.